Further relaxation of social distancing measures on Thursday. Putin on a visit to Belarus as Russian troops conduct military drills there. And in the UK, the High Court upholds a government plan to send migrants to Rwanda. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The city reported 14,982 new coronavirus cases, with 870 being imported infections. Meanwhile, more social distancing rules will be eased on Thursday. People will no longer have to take rapid antigen tests before attending banquets or entering bars. Mimosa Ngai has more.
With the government stopping the compulsory scanning of the Leave Home Safe app and doing away with the Amber Health Code for incoming travelers, more control measures will be eased just days ahead of Christmas. Starting Thursday, there will be no more limit on the number of visitors entering bars and nightclubs, party rooms, theme parks and theaters. No more cap on the number of people attending banquets. But one restriction stays the same. Only up to 12 diners per table will be allowed. Those entering bars and banquets or joining local tours will no longer have to show pictures of a negative RAT result prior to their entries. Eating and drinking will also be allowed in the outdoor areas of public entertainment and sports venues. But the relaxation has prompted concerns as daily infections are lingering at about 10,000 cases.
We know that the holidays and the seasonings is actually coming up, and the whole government actually looking deeply into where we can actually further relax all the relaxation or all the measures so that we can go back to a normal life. In this regards, even there's a high number of cases of positive cases at the current moment, we still observe the slope of the increase seems to be actually quite settled.
This wedding planner said a couple who is getting married next month has already invited more guests. But he stressed that under the pandemic, hosting real-time video weddings or intimate weddings have apparently become the trend, adding there have been more options on the plate for newlyweds. This restaurant operator expects business to only improve in the long run, but not in the coming week, saying many people are out of town. Still, it remains mandatory to wear masks and display the vaccine pass when entering restaurants. Meanwhile, the Lunar New Year fireworks display has been called off for the 4th consecutive year, with authorities saying there's not enough time to make preparations despite the relaxed social distancing rules. Mimosa Ngai, TVB News.
Chief Executive John Lee will start a duty visit to Beijing tomorrow. He will brief state leaders on the city's latest economic, social and political issues. He will return to Hong Kong on Saturday.
Speaking ahead of the weekly Executive Council meeting, Chief Executive John Lee took the initiative to talk about his first duty visit to Beijing since he took office in July.
Of course, I will be reflecting the concern of Hong Kong people whose voices are already heard, I think, by the Central People's Government.
The concern being the resumption of cross-border travel between the city and the mainland will be one of the topics of discussion, along with anti-epidemic efforts and the economy, Lee said. Carol Yip, Director of the Chief Executive's Office, and the Private Secretary to the CE, Priscilla To, will join the visit. No word on whether Lee will be accompanied by any senior officials. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Defense Ministry posted a 1-minute video on social media Sunday, thanking 52 countries and territories for assisting Ukraine in its war against Russia. The flags of countries included the United States, France, and Germany were shown very quickly. What appears to be the Hong Kong SAR flag, but in black, was also displayed.
In relation to a wrong regional flag, it is a matter of foreign affairs. We have spoken to the Commissioner for Foreign Affairs, and this will be followed up by them. So if you have any inquiries, please go to ask them.
The CE was also asked if the authorities will have any follow-up actions after Google turned down the SAR's government's request to ensure the accurate Chinese national anthem appears as a top search result on certain keywords.
It is an offense for somebody to play a song which is not the Hong Kong national anthem, which is also the national anthem of the PRC, because it constitutes insult. So that content constitutes an offense, so it conforms to the Google policy of removing content for legal reason. We all know very well that Google has the means to do it. It's a question of whether Google chooses to do it. If he chooses not to do it, then I think he has a lot to explain.
The CE added it will keep in touch with the tech giant to rectify the situation, adding that an organization as big as Google will take things seriously.
There have been 43 cases of the bacterial disease melioidosis in Hong Kong so far this year. According to the Hong Kong Polytechnic University and the Hong Kong University, the local strain of melioidosis is a new one transmitted by air. The research team also said melioidosis could spread widely after typhoons and heavy rain. The Polytechnic University analysed 38 cases in West Kowloon and air samples from Pac-Tin Estate for whole genome sequencing and comparison. It turned out that both were the same and belonged to the new melioidosis strain, ST1996. This strain was already found in one patient in Sham Shui Po district in 2016, but at that time the reconstruction site of Pac-Tin village had not started, so the research team felt that the site was not the source of the outbreak. The team also discovered melioidosis could spread widely after typhoons, increasing the risk of public infection.
The public will, it's more easy to get infected with the bacteria and, develop into melioidosis after the typhoon. That bacteria is supposed to be reside in a deeper layer in the soil. But in case of heavy rainfall, so it will get, the soil will get wet, and actually the bacteria will quite easy to move upward to the surface of the soil. After the typhoon, you can see the viable bacteria may present, in the atmosphere. So that will be more easy to get infected.
Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong said she will push China to lift trade sanctions and seek consular access to 2 detained Australians during her visit to Beijing. But Wong, who is expected to meet her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi tomorrow, tempered expectations of any immediate breakthrough. Wong's visit to China is the first by an Australian minister since 2019. It will also mark the first formal talks in Beijing between the two nations' top diplomats since 2018. Australia has been seeking consular access for journalist Chen Lei and writer Yang Hengjun. The pair are detained in China and awaiting sentences after national security trials. Meanwhile, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd has been appointed the country's next ambassador to the United States. He will begin his post early next year. Russian President Vladimir Putin admitted Monday that the invasion of Ukraine was not going smoothly. He ordered the Federal Security Services to step up surveillance of Russian society and the border areas to prevent risks from abroad and traitors at home. Meanwhile, Putin made his first visit to Belarus since 2019. Tracy Furness has more.
Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Belarus Monday with his defense and foreign ministers fanning fears in Kiev that he intends to pressure his ex-Soviet ally to join a fresh ground offensive that would open a new front against Ukraine. Putin, whose troops have been driven back in Ukraine's north, northeast and south, is taking a more public role in what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine. Putin's trip for talks with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko was his first since 2019. He said Monday that he supported Lukashenko's proposal to train Belarusian crews on specially modified warplanes capable of carrying nuclear weapons. Earlier in the year, Russia and Belarus announced a plan to modernize Belarusian aircraft to give them this capability. Russian forces used Belarus as a launch pad for their abortive attack on Kiev in February, and there has been Russian and Belarusian military activity there since. Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry released footage of drills on training grounds in Belarus Monday, while Putin was preparing to visit the country. In Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's nightly address, he said 30 Iranian drones were shot down Monday. This morning, in several regions and cities of our country, was unfortunately spoilt by the characteristic sound of the Iranian Shahed drones. Most of them, luckily, did not reach their intended targets, and that made our morning a little better today, Zelensky said. The Ukrainian military said their air defenses had shot down 23 of 28 drones, mostly over Kiev. And Ukraine is accelerating efforts to erase the vestiges of centuries of Soviet and Russian influence from public spaces. They are pulling down monuments and renaming streets to honor Ukrainian artists, poets, military chiefs, and war heroes. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
European Union energy ministers Monday agreed on a gas price cap after weeks of talks on emergency measures that have split opinion as the bloc seeks to deal with the energy crisis. The cap is the EU's latest attempt to lower gas prices that have pushed up energy bills and driven record high inflation in Europe. Ministers agreed to trigger a cap if prices exceed €180 per megawatt hour for 3 days on the TTF Gas Hub's front-month contract, which serves as the European benchmark. It will be triggered on February 15, 2023, if the deal is formally approved by the 27 European countries in writing. Meanwhile, Russia says the cap is an attack on market pricing. And Hungary's foreign minister said his government would renegotiate its long-term contract with Russia's state energy company if the EU goes forward with the price cap. In London, the High Court has ruled that Britain's plan to send migrants to Rwanda is lawful. That marks a victory for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who has made a high-stakes political promise to tackle the record number of migrants arriving in small boats. The policy would involve Britain sending tens of thousands of migrants who arrive on its shores to Rwanda in southern Africa. The move has been denounced by rights groups after it was announced in April. On Monday, the High Court said it was lawful for Britain to make arrangements with the Rwanda government to send asylum seekers to the country for their asylum claims to be determined there. Those granted asylum would stay in Rwanda rather than returning to the UK. Human rights groups said it is immoral and inhumane to send people more than 6,400 kilometers away to a country they don't want to live in.
A very disappointing judgment from the High Court now, which is certainly going to encourage the government to think that it will be able to start deporting people to Rwanda. We are opposed to that for a wide range of reasons, including Rwanda's own human rights record and its need to address the rights of people who have sought asylum on its territory. This country, the UK, ought instead to simply be addressing the rights to asylum of people who have sought asylum on the UK's territory, rather than seeking to expel people and wash its hands of its own responsibilities by passing them to Rwanda.
Still to come on tonight's news. The government's Kaoyi Chao Artificial Islands project will cost $80 billion more than initially planned. A shooting incident at a condominium building near Toronto leaves 6 dead. And the Dutch Prime Minister apologizes for his country's historical role in slavery. Welcome back to TVB News. The government says it estimates the cost of the Kaoyi Chao Artificial Islands project will go up to $580 billion That's $80 billion more than initially planned. The project involves the building of 3 artificial islands off Lantau, and it is expected to accommodate around 550,000 people. The first group of residents can move in by 2033. Christy Khan has more.
The former Chief Executive Carrie Lam proposed the Lantau Tomorrow Vision project in 2018, suggesting to construct 2 artificial islands off Lantau to provide more residential flats to alleviate the housing problem in the city. Earlier, the government had submitted a revised plan to LegCo, indicating that 3 artificial islands will be built instead. The artificial islands will provide about 1,000 hectares of new land for development, with a Y-shaped water channel running between them to minimize the impact on the marine ecology, such as the corals and water quality. The project is expected to provide 190,000 to 210,000 residential flats to accommodate around 550,000 people. Separately, around 270,000 job opportunities will be created. One of the artificial islands, which is the closest to Hong Kong Island, will be developed to be a core business district. The proposed reclamation is set to begin in the second half of 2025. The government estimates that the first batch of residents can move there in 2033. Furthermore, a green mass transit system will be built to connect the 3 islands. Residents will be able to navigate from one destination to another within 15 minutes. In the proposal, the government also said transport infrastructure will connect the artificial islands to Hong Kong Island and North-East Lantau. Originally, the railway network would have linked North Lantau to Tuen Mun, but it has changed to connect to Hong Kong Island West and Hong Shui Kiu in the new territories instead. Lawmaker Michael Tan opposed the newly submitted plan, criticizing the government's decision as unfavorable to Tuen Mun residents. With the introduction of multiple amendments, the cost of the whole project is expected to go up to $580 billion. It is $80 billion more than the government's initial estimation in 2018. However, the authorities expect the artificial islands project will generate about $750 billion from the land sales revenue. The amount is about $600 billion less than the initial assumption. Christy Khan, TVB News.
The government has reached agreement with its Guangdong provincial counterpart, allowing private cars from Hong Kong to travel to Guangdong via the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge without any quota limitation. The quota-free scheme is set to take effect early next year. Holders of the home return permit and drivers of Hong Kong-registered private cars can apply to the scheme to drive to Guangdong. Only private cars with 8 seats or less are qualified, and designated drivers per car should be no more than 2. They can stay on the mainland for a maximum of 30 days each time and no more than 180 days in total per year. Governments on both sides are working together to simplify the application procedures and reduce the handling fees. More details of the arrangement are expected early next year. 6 people, including a gunman, were killed in a shooting at a condominium building near Toronto on Sunday. A 73-year-old man is alleged to have killed his neighbors before being shot dead by police. The man is said to have had a dispute with members of the condominium's board, 3 of whom were killed. Canadian media said the suspect, Francesco Villi, was involved in ongoing litigation with the board. According to the police, the victims were shot in separate units on different floors. A 66-year-old woman is in hospital with serious injuries. Police killed Villi inside the building.
Yeah, 5, so total 6 deceased. 1 of them is the subject. The other 5 are victims. There is a 7th person who was initially shot. That person will survive and is transported to a local hospital.
Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has apologized on behalf of the Dutch state for its historical role in slavery in a speech welcomed by activists but greeted in silence by an invited audience at the National Archive.
Today, I apologize.
The apology comes amid a wider reconsideration of the country's colonial past, but many said it was forced and not enough. Many descendants of enslaved people are seeking reparations, but Root told reporters the government will not be offering compensation. Instead, it is establishing a €200 million fund for initiatives to help tackle the legacy of slavery in the Netherlands and its former colonies. Historians estimate Dutch traders shipped more than 500,000 Africans to the Americas, mostly Brazil and the Caribbean. That's the news. Thanks for watching.